Welcome to the Clemson Insider for our Tiger Talk this week. Will Vandervoort, Gavin Oliver, we get you kind of set for this week's game as the Tigers head to Chapel Hill for the first time since 2010 and play the North Carolina Tar Heels. A very interesting last couple of days, Gavin, to say the least, with the comments from a few of the players, Coach Sweeney, Tony Elliott, Brent Venables the last couple of days. It's been a fun couple of days. I think that's the best way to say it. People have probably seen some of the stuff there on their website. What are your thoughts on for the first couple of days?
Yeah, we got a bunch of players. The coaches were good. There was a lot of interesting things said. We're going to run through some of the topics, but I thought the players are pretty lighthearted going into this matchup. They're ready for another road challenge and seem to be in good spirits heading into a big ACC matchup.
I think road challenge is the best way to describe that, because I think it is going to be somewhat of a little bit of a challenge. I think North Carolina is, though not to the level that Clemson is from a talent standpoint, but as Dabo said today, they're good enough to beat them. He says a couple years ago nobody thought Syracuse would beat us. So he's kind of relaying that message to his team. Hey, look, this team they play hard. They got a coach who's a Hall of Fame, legendary kind of head coach. They're going to come in here prepared to play, and they're going to play well. That means you're going to have to play well to beat them. But Coach Sweeney had a lot of interesting things to say today. And he even talked about his experiences with Mack Brown and how they met. And he went into a really good story as far as his first trip to Austin when Mack Brown was the head coach at Texas. So that was Dabo Sweeney talking about his first trip to Austin. A funny story. We had that on the website earlier as well, and I know a lot of you guys liked it and commented on it and talked about it. And so it was good to see that Dabo always kind of gives that comical version of how things happen at least once a week or so in his press conference. But Gavin, he had a lot of other things to talk about too today. I know you wrote a good story that's up on the website as well about Sam Howell and the challenge this young freshman quarterback's going to play to Clemson this week.
Yeah, you touched on it earlier. You mentioned Dabo thinks that North Carolina is capable of beating them if they play their best. And the biggest compliment he really gave to Sam today was saying that every time they play, that guy gives North Carolina a chance to win the game because of his ability to make plays, his ability to throw the ball. He talked about a play he made against Wake on a two-point conversion attempt where he just threw a dart and a very accurate pass to the boundary in a trips formation and just threw a laser in there. And not only can he do that, but he can also run the ball, scrambling ability. They do a lot of RPOs and zone reads, option type stuff, quarterback draws. So he's a dual threat guy, a dynamic guy that can make a lot of plays. And Dabo really talked a lot about it. Another compliment he gave him, I guess, depending on how you look at it, if you're a Baker Mayfield fan or not, whether it's a compliment, but he called Sam Howell Baker Mayfield-esque is what the wording he used, just talking about really, he's not as fast as Baker Mayfield is, but really the comparisons he sees is his similarities in terms of grit and toughness, just being a hard-nosed player that's not afraid to take a hit. When he runs not to slide, not to get down, but he runs to punish somebody, Dabo said. So Dabo really had a lot of praise for Sam Howell in terms of his savviness and moxie and just that kind of, what he brings to the table in that regard. So Dabo, Clemson recruited Sam Howell. They offered him in, January 2018. He was one of the most highly regarded quarterbacks in the 2019 recruiting class. Clemson recruited him, offered him. Howell eventually committed to Florida State, but before flipping his commitment to Mack Brown in North Carolina on the first day of the early signing period. So that was a big recruiting get for Mack Brown for sure. His first major recruiting victory in his second stint with the Tar Heels.
And another thing that stands out, and Dabo mentioned that today about Howell, is his confidence in the fourth quarter. If you go look at his numbers in the fourth quarter, Dabo talked about how and he's told his team this, look, they don't ever give up, especially with this guy at quarterback. They've come back in the fourth quarter of every game and either have won it or had a chance to win it or tie it at the end of the game, and that's because of the quarterback. Yeah. They just have this belief that they can win every game, and so, it's interesting this week, if Clemson gets on top early, they have to keep their foot on the gas and not let up, because if they do, this team has the confidence that they can come back no matter who they play.
That's true. Yeah, I think this note Dabo gave was like 70% of, he's completed about 70% of his passes of 10-plus yards in the fourth quarter, I believe was the stat that Dabo used. And then before that, he's not been nearly as good, Dabo said, on, and passes of 10-plus yards. So that's just amazing. That's just a gamer right there, a guy that steps up his game in crunch time and just elevates his level of play when it matters most, and that's another trait that makes Howell a special player.
Now, the last time Clemson went to Chapel Hill was in 2010 when I can't believe it's been 2010. I mean, what were you, 14 then? I mean, it was like you were just a young guy. You were a teenager. Yeah. Unfortunately, I was very old. So anyway, but yeah, then 2010 was the last time the Tigers visited Chapel Hill. I remember being there. I was working with the Clemson athletic department at the time with my duties with IPTE, and I remember being on the sideline and how Clemson outplayed them for most of that game, but yet just these stupid penalties would come up and it would knock them out of field goal range, or they missed a couple of field goals, and they had penalties on defense, allowed North Carolina to get field position and score a couple touchdowns, and just nothing went right for the Tigers. And Dabo talked about that today, how in his 17 years here as an assistant coach and as a head coach, that's his only trip to Chapel Hill, and he talked about how it was a miserable night, is the way he described it today. And that he really took a lot of blame, saying it was his worst coaching job in his career. And when we asked him to elaborate a little bit on that, he just said he didn't have his players ready to play. He says it's the only time he really can remember where he did not have his team ready to play a football game, and it really, you could tell it really got to Dabo. And I think he's using that for himself and the coaching staff, because Jeff Scott was on that staff and a couple other guys were, to say, look, we got to do a better job this week. We got to make sure, A, they do have a better team going up there, but B, they got to make sure those guys are ready to play. And I think it's kind of goes hand in hand with what they've been doing all year, Gavin, is, not only as best as the standard, but also leave no doubt kind of deal. And I think Sweeney's using 2010, even though it's a totally different team, to kind of sell that to his players.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think he's definitely going to be harping on the 2010 game this week and reminding players, they weren't there, they didn't know what happened, just reminding them what happened last time they went to Chapel Hill and how they left with a loss, and how this time around they want to leave no doubt and make sure they get it done. Just like with Syracuse, the last time they had went there before recently, they came away with a loss, but then they wanted to come back and leave no doubt. I think, Clemson wasn't ready to play that night in Syracuse. They came around this time, was ready to play. So I think we'll see the same thing. Sweeney's going to have his bunch ready to go this time.
Now, we had a couple other things, on Tuesday with Dabo Sweeney with Brent Venables and Tony Elliott on Monday talking to us. Some interesting things that came out of those conversations, Kevin.
Yeah, Tony Elliott, just one of the funny things that pops out to me about what he said. He was talking about the filming of the Disney movie, Safety, at halftime of the game. And Tony Elliott, he talked about how he's usually very quiet and reserved. He doesn't say a whole lot. He's usually, except for when he's calling plays and trying to get his guys organized, he doesn't really say a whole lot. But at halftime, he looked up and he was like, like he said to his guys, he said, oh, look, they're at the top of the hill. And Dabo looked over to Elliott and some of the guys that were standing around him and said, the real Tigers are on the hill, and the real Tigers are on the field, and the Hollywood Tigers are on the hill. That's just a funny little story that Elliott told.
I could see Dabo saying that too in their ears by their church. Instead of calling plays, they're talking about the fake Tigers at the top of the hill. I could see that.
Yeah. So that was a funny story he shared. Just another kind of a humorous story. Trevor Lawrence was asked if somebody were to play him in a movie, who would he want it to be? And Trevor kind of thought for a second and was like, I don't know, that's a good question. And eventually he's like, I guess it would have to be Sunshine from Remember the Titans, which was the perfect answer. And the media just cracked up laughing.
Yeah, he looked over at me and says, is he still available? Is he still doing it? So it was real funny.
He might be too old now, is what Lawrence said, but I'll take sunshine. Yeah, so that was pretty funny. Just a couple of the more lighthearted notes. So, like I said earlier, the team's kind of in a good mood.
Yeah, and if you saw on the board, I put a little side by side of the two guys, and that was
check that out.
So they could really look like it's on the board. Check it out. I got Trevor's quote and also what Sunshine looks like now. And Trevor, I mean, he technically I think could still play him.
Yeah.
So it could maybe work. You know, I know Sunshine's a little bit older, but hey, maybe he's in his 30s now, probably. So
hey, it could work.
It could work.
It's a great answer though.
Yeah, great answer. And then also we talked with Kayvon Wallace and Brent Venables yesterday, and Venables, Kayvon was asked about the emotions of Brent Venables, and so Kayvon was like, we love playing for the guy because sometimes we know he wants to run out to the field and make tackles or make an interception, and he said on his pick six, he said as he went back and watched the film the other day, he said he could see Coach Venables basically acting like he was catching the ball, and then he could see Venables running all the way down the sideline with him as he's taking the ball into the house for the touchdown. He says that just really gets them enthusiastic and pumped up. And so then I followed that up with Coach Venables later and asked Venables, about that and about how he feels on the sidelines. And his answer was great about what Wallace said. He says, "Well, I don't know if I want to go out there. But I tell you what, if I was out there, I would pick the pass off because I know where I'm supposed to be." So it was a little dig at Kayvon, and I thought it was really good. So just some good, like you mentioned, lighthearted stuff going on between the coaches and players, just kind of having a little fun. I think they're in a good mood and good spirits. Dabo did say they talked to the team last night, talked to them about what this week means, conference game, what's at stake for them, and I think they're going to be ready to play on Saturday. So there's some lightheartedness and some joking around going around, but there's a lot of seriousness as well. So we'll see what happens. That's all we got for Tiger Talk this week. We got a lot coming up on the website, so stay tuned to the Clemson Insiders. We get you up to date on the Tigers and what they're doing the rest of this week as we get you set for Clemson at North Carolina and Chapel Hill on Saturday.